The iron doors swung open heavily, and a seemingly grown man emerged from behind them, but no. It was a guy who had recently turned 29, but because of his irregular lifestyle, he looked to be in his 40s. The guy's name was Ivan and he had just been released, leaving the stuffy cell behind. As soon as he was outside the prison, he took a deep breath, lifted his head to the sky, and immediately the bright rays of the summer sun hit his eyes. Ivan squeezed his eyes shut, and thoughts of how to go on with his life appeared in his head. Except his thoughts were not clear, and almost immediately, he thought of a new crime, but one that would not get him caught. Unfortunately, he did not know how to live any other way, because since his childhood he had been stealing. At first he stole for his parents, who were inveterate alcoholics, and to buy another bottle, they made the 10-year-old son climb the windows of their apartments, picking up everything that could be sold. But it couldn't go on like this forever, and soon they were caught. The parents were deprived of parental rights and imprisoned, and Ivan was placed in an orphanage. But the boy could no longer live without stealing. At the orphanage, he would often steal from other already poor children, and then he got involved with the same teenagers. Things were more serious, and one day his new friends even killed a man. Ivan, seeing death for the first time, ran away because he was scared because he would get a real sentence for it, which soon happened. His former friends were already given jail time and put in juvenile detention, while Ivan managed to avoid a harsh punishment since he was not involved in beating the man, and at the time, he was only 13 years old. The boy was placed on the register, but a year later he was caught stealing and sent to places not so distant. When he served his first term, he was released and began to think about giving up stealing and starting a new life, but how could he do that? He had no education, and besides, after prison, no one wanted to hire him. Fortunately, at the time his parents' apartment belonged to him, but his parents were no longer alive. His father was killed in the penal colony, and his mother burned to death after she was released from prison. He was lucky that his parents were not always drunkards. When Ivan was born, his mother immediately registered her son in the apartment, and they lived happily until his father was fired from his job. He had worked there for more than 10 years and simply could not accept the loss of the job he loved, which is why he began to drink. At first my mother tried to fight him, but soon she had a drink herself, and that's how they started drinking. Being in his legal apartment, Ivan was constantly looking for work, but all to no avail. Sometimes, of course, he unloaded grocery cars, but there was not enough money, and he had to go back to his old occupation. He tried to steal small things and always in different places, but when people started reporting to the police station, Ivan was quickly caught. By that point, the amount of money was terribly high. This time he went to jail for a long time due to his existing legal problems, but even such a long sentence did not teach him anything. When he got to the apartment, he found out that it had long since fallen into disrepair and that he had been discharged by court for sale. Now he really did not know what to do next at the age of 29, and he had money for the first time because he had hidden all the things he had stolen before his sentence, and of course he did not tell the investigators about them. Waiting for nightfall, he went to the hiding place where there was a little more than 100,000. This money was enough for the first time, and he already knew what to do next. With difficulty Ivan managed to find a place to rent, paying for 3 months at a time. The money dropped considerably, although the amount of monthly rent was only 20,000. He was left with exactly half of the money, which he spent almost all of in the first month. He bought expensive groceries, a lot of alcohol, without even thinking about trying to find any work. In the second month, he began to think about who to rob and where. Ivan even got in touch with a guy who was from his circles and those very places of incarceration. The new acquaintance gave him a tip about a village where he said a rich grandmother lived, but warned him that this was just a rumor. Hearing such useful information, Ivan was happy, and not even a single muscle on his face trembled, because very soon he would be robbing a harmless grandmother. After receiving the coordinates, he immediately set off, spending his last money on a cab. It took him a little over an hour to get there, after which he was dropped off near a village whose name he never understood, since the paint had burned off in the sun. The only thing that was clear was that the village was very old. As soon as it started to get dark outside, he walked around the whole village, but surprisingly did not see a single inhabitant. The houses, though overgrown with grass, did not look that old, and the road was rolled up, which means that people come here. Ivan wanted to think that they just had datches, where they relax in the summer, but he doubted it, because it was the height of summer. As soon as it got dark outside, there was light in some of the houses, and it was no longer so creepy to think that he was alone in the village at all. After waiting for complete darkness, he quietly went to look for the house that his friend had told him about. A couple of minutes' walk and Ivan was already looking at the same house, the windows of which had no light, but this did not embarrass the guy, and he went into the yard, looking around. There was no dog in the fence, just waist-length grass, which he could not see from behind the fence. Standing on the porch, Ivan shined a dim flashlight and saw the lock, which was no problem. The guy took out his favorite picks and started picking it, and it soon yielded. He carefully placed the lock next to the door. Because of the lock, it was clear that nobody was at home, so there was no point in such a careful sneaking in. The most important thing was that the neighbors would not hear, and even if they did, it was a long way to get to this village, so by the time the police arrived, Ivan would be gone. Once inside, Ivan immediately began to open every drawer he could find. He slowly made his way deep into the house, like a lost animal, rummaging through other people's belongings. The house was quite large for one grandmother. The kitchen alone was like half of his rented apartment. Next to the kitchen, there were two rooms. One served for receiving guests, in the middle of which there was a long sofa, and opposite was a huge TV, but Ivan did not even pay attention to it, because he did not want to bother selling the equipment. In addition, it did not fit into the plan for the return trip. In this room he was able to find various rings and chains, and that was it. Next in line was the next room, which most likely served to house guests. It was there, in the closet under the bedding, that he was able to find money. There was about 20,000, and from such a find, Ivan's mood immediately improved. Even though it wasn't much money, but it was still money, and it meant that the acquaintance hadn't cheated, except that Ivan had a question that began to torment him immediately after he had found it. He could not understand if the guy knew, even if it was rumored, that there was money in the house. Why had he not come and taken it himself? Ivan couldn't to understand it, no matter how hard he tried. The last room was finished and he came to a locked door, which was most likely the mistress' bedroom. There was a lock on it too, and that was welcome, for it was a sign that there really was something of value there. He was able to pick the lock with a clever motion, but as soon as he opened the tight door, he immediately smelled rotten, so he covered his nose with his hand and went inside. The light from the flashlight went directly to the bed on which the old woman's body lay. Fear gripped him at once, but he was not going to leave, because judging by the smell, it was clear that she had been dead for a long time. But why had she not been buried, but just locked in the house? Chasing away bad thoughts, Ivan looked all over the bedroom, but there was nothing there until his gaze fell on the chest pushed under the bed. He did not want to go after it, but he knew that perhaps the most valuable thing was hidden there. Ivan approached the bed, trying not to look at his grandmother, and then knelt down and climbed under the bed. Grabbing the chest, he pulled it toward him, as suddenly a hand touched the boy's back. He almost squealed in fear, like a frightened puppy, and his heart immediately went to his heels. He forgot all about the trunk and started crawling on all fours to the door, where he turned round expecting to see a living corpse, but it was not to be. It was only when he shined the light on the old woman that he realized that her arm had come off the bed, or perhaps he had been careless and hit it. After catching his breath, he slid under the bed again, and this time he managed to grab the trunk. Without leaving the bedroom, he opened it, almost drooling. The old shabby chest was filled to the brim with gold. From what he saw, he didn't even care about the corpse, and Ivan began frantically transferring all the goods into his backpack. When the job was done, he walked over to the corpse. There was no fear at the moment. He was overwhelmed by the joy of the loot, but he didn't know Chura, and as soon as he saw the gold coins lying in front of his grandmother, he couldn't help himself. Carefully, he took them, while his eyes still remained closed. Thanking his grandmother for such an expensive gift, he was about to leave, but the old woman's eyes flew open, and it seemed that her pupils were not looking at the ceiling, but directly at him. From what he saw, Ivan staggered back to the door, still illuminating the dead man. He closed the door behind him and hurried toward the exit, but a loud bang from the bedroom made him stop. He thought a corpse had fallen off the bed, or at least that was what it sounded like. Ivan turned around slowly, and his bladder couldn't take the fear. The door opened and the same grandmother who had just been dead was looking at him. Her twitching movements and wide-open mouth gave him an unbelievable sense of dread. There was a hiss, and like a marathon runner she rushed to Ivan, who did not hesitate and ran as fast as he could to the door, but the puddle at his feet played a cruel joke. The guy's feet slid like a car on ice. Because of this nuance, he lost a few seconds, but still managed, literally from the granny's hands, to get out. Ivan did not even close the door behind him, like a bird, flying over the fence. Unfortunately for the guy, the fence didn't hold her back, and the guy out of the corner of his eye, through the darkness, saw her running after him. In his head, he cursed all that gold, but he couldn't get rid of it. The satchel was still dangling on his shoulders, and the same gold coins were rattling in his pocket, but he wasn't going to give them up either. As soon as Ivan ran out onto the road, he made sure she was no longer chasing him, and after catching his breath, he wandered with trembling legs toward town, hoping that someone would give him a ride, but it didn't happen. The road was empty, and he could reach the city only towards evening. On his way to the apartment, he handed over the coins to the pawn shop and bought alcohol and came home. Tiredness was taking its toll, but after a few drinks, it became easier. Ivan stayed up late into the night, and then something happened that he did not expect. When the guy went to bed, there was a knock in the kitchen. It was exactly the same knock after which his grandmother chased him. Even in his drunken state, he didn't dare go to check, but just wrapped himself in a blanket. A minute later, footsteps rang out and he saw Granny's face peering out of the kitchen, piercing his gaze. With broken movement she walked toward Ivan's bed, then her smelly cold hands grabbed him by the throat. He could not resist the old woman's monstrous strength, and soon his body went limp and his heart stopped beating. Ivan could not have imagined in his last seconds that he would pay with his life for the stolen gold. Thank you for your attention and please subscribe so you don't miss new stories. For the likes, thank you.